Alright, good morning, kids. Hopefully you saw the last one and you're going to know where we are. But we're about to talk about how science has changed since Newton. Alright, love you.
Period around 400 years ago, basically around Galileo.
Oh, Galileo.
Where you have an idea and then you test it. And then the consequence of the test gives you confidence in what whether your idea represents nature or not. Before then, science as it was practiced didn't work that way. People just had ideas and they just said that's how it was. So it's Galileo onward is what I'm referring to. In those last 400 years, there have been times when people didn't understand things, and there was the urge to say that God did it.
Right.
Because God is a greater intellect than humans, and if you don't understand it, and God made the universe, clearly God understands it, and that was a perfectly fine explanation.
It also eased frustration.
Yes, because if you were uncomfortable with the unknown, that was a gap filler for you, right? And so what we found is, if you go back through the history of these 400 years, there's so many cases where what was unknown then became explained with just completely natural causes, and then you can reproduce them, and then you can make it happen, and then people stop saying that God is in that gap, and they put God in another gap, and so it's basically this phrase. It's called the God of the gaps, where you have the urge to say that God is where you don't understand what's going on in the universe, and so much in the past has overridden that I don't feel confident invoking God where I don't understand something, because in the past it hasn't worked.
Right.
So now I'm not convinced. But back to intelligent design. There's a whole video of me, one of my most viewed video clips, back from 2006. I attended a conference called Beyond Belief, and it was held at the Salk Institute in San Diego, and it was held there for several reasons, but in part there's a huge neuroscience center there, and part of the interest of the assembled audience and the speakers, but myself included, was what's going on in the mind of someone who thinks scientifically, someone who thinks religiously, someone who has a spiritual experience. What's going on? And what does it mean to have religious scientists? Let's probe those brains. Stick whatever brain people do when they analyze the neurosynaptic profile. Let's figure that out. So it was a way to intersect religious people. There were religious people there, as well as neuroscientists and even some devout atheists, like Richard Dawkins was there.
Oh, sure.
It was quite an assembly. In that workshop, I gave a talk about intelligent design, just saying that it's really, you're ignoring, if you like intelligent design, typically you're ignoring all of the things in nature that are not intelligently designed, which would then thwart the arguments that you're making. And there's all manner of things that are just, any engineer would not have done it that way. And so once you get a balanced view of what nature is doing, then it's untenable to think that what's going on around you is any product of intelligence at all.
That's because engineers only know what they know now after this much evolution.
So, and how many people it kills each year or throughout a century? Millions of people.
Yeah.
It's millions.
That's intelligent.
Right? There's been, there's a 250,000 people killed just a few years ago in Haiti, for example.
Yeah.
Okay.
And how about the Indonesian?
Excuse me. Right. That's another 250,000. Right. That's 500,000 just in the last, in 2004, 2005. So there's a question that was raised by philosophers of the 18th century. It was, upon looking at natural disasters, in particular, one of the big triggering examples of a natural disaster among these philosophers was the famous earthquake in Lisbon in the 1750s. It happened on All Saints' Day. It happened in the morning. It happened when everyone was in church. And the largest structures in towns at that time
were churches.
And so when there's an earthquake, what's the first building to collapse? The biggest structure.
And in those days, they did not make them earthquake-proof.
Yes, exactly. And so on All Saints' Day, in one of the holiest cities in Europe, an earthquake struck, followed by a tsunami. And basically Lisbon, as anyone had known it at the time, was destroyed. 80,000 people died, most of them in churches.
One day,
and the philosophers said, they posed the following question. If there is a God, that God is either
here it comes,
not all-powerful or not all good.
Wait, what?
It was an interesting sort of logical conclusion.
Well, and I've always, reading accounts of the Bible in Genesis, I've always wondered why people are such, fearing of God, and why, this God, whoever it may be, I don't want to go off on a tangent about religion right now, or God, but I just think if there is a God, it's benevolent. That God is not out to maim and murder
we're not
and destroy.
the only thing he cares
so it
about.
depends on what you mean by benevolent, because of course in the Old Testament, God would punish you if you disobey him. And so are you benevolent if you punish someone for disobeying you?
Oh, we've been disobeyed.
So
sounds like ownership.
Well, that's a different concept of benevolence from the New Testament, where one is not punished, for wrongdoing. It's a different kind of forgiveness that goes on there. I don't know any example of forgiveness in the Old Testament. I mean, if it's there, I missed it, because most of what rises up out of that book, that series of books, are sort of vengeance and anger and for example, when Moses comes down with the Ten Commandments, I've done this experiment. You ask people, Moses comes down with the Ten Commandments from Mount Sinai, and what happens next? And people say, oh, well, he sees the revelers and the golden calf, and
he goes crazy.
He breaks the tablet, and he goes crazy. And so I said, well, then what happens? They say, oh, well, then the earth opens up, they fall in. He summons the power of God, earth opens up, they fall in, and they die. And then everything's back to normal. Okay?
Oh, yeah.
That's typically what people tell me. And I'd say, well, do you realize that was just the movie? That was like Charlie. The movie, okay? Have you actually read this account in Exodus? Have you read it? And even if they had, it's not. They must have glossed over it. What actually happens is Moses summons Aaron. They wield their swords and they slaughter with their swords 3,000 men. Now, usually they don't count how many women they kill, because that's not, back then, they only counted the men. But if they killed everyone who was reveling, we can assume that there were as many women as men in that number. So that makes 6,000 people slaughtered by Moses, Aaron, and others who sided with him and God against these people. Now, all these people did was make a golden calf, and they wanted to take it back to Egypt. So they didn't actually kill anybody. They just sort of disobeyed God. And so that's not, I don't see that as benevolence, right?
And they probably didn't know any better.
Perhaps, sure, it's a really long time ago, and societies are still being, the conduct within societies is still being formulated. But all I'm saying is that if your health or longevity is a priority of your God, then either God is not all-powerful or he's not all good, because the earth spends a lot of its time trying to kill us.
Yeah.
Yes, it does.
And earth itself,
we're not the only
often thought of as a haven for life, is really good at rendering life extinct.
I sometimes think the planet, pulling the old Gaia theory, is intelligent, is a living organism, and is correcting itself.
Yeah, I once tweeted all these earthquakes and things, and I said, Earth is just trying to shake us off its back.
Yeah, it is.
Earth is pissed off.
It is. It is trying to correct itself,
but
in a bizarre way.
Now, humans are not sort of uniquely susceptible to the forces of the Earth. What I'm saying is that the estimates are 98, 99% of all life forms that ever existed are now extinct. So it's false to assert that Earth is a haven for life, unless being a haven for life means it's just fine to render life extinct. Now, of course, I'd rather live here than Venus, where it's 900 degrees.
It's a little too hot. Neil, we're going to take this break. We're going to come back and get into your work, Space Chronicles. We're going to find out what NASA's doing. Will we ever get back to the moon? Will we ever get to Mars? Let's find out.
Let's find out. Neil deGrasse Tyson, our special guest tonight. After
I'm George Dory.
I'm George Dory. We'll be right back. All right. So I hope you're enjoying this life at 55 on Mike Island. I don't know if any kids from high school days remember Mike Island, but that's a story for another day. So I don't know if I'm going to call it Life at 55 or Living at the Limit. I don't know if I like that. But basically, this is going to be my daily vlog. I think at least I'll have a copy of the shows, so you guys can come along for the ride. We might see some things. I figure I might as well have this thing on, because stuff happens all the time. Might as well be having shots of it. In any case, there's not really a whole lot to look at. Up, the clouds are kind of pretty well overcast, so primarily just gonna keep with the side shot. Actually, I'll take a look and see how that's coming out. I just finished my fruit for the morning. I started blending up in a Vitamix, which we got in Costco. An apple that I usually eat while I'm driving, or before I head out when I'm getting my work. Now I blend it up with my protein shake that I put my vitamins in, and the nuts and cashews and peanuts and hazelnut and cranberries and Ionic Supreme and cinnamon and baking soda and I think that's it. Oh, and Annie Coco, I love you. I put a little of that green liquid eyedropper that you sent us, and I stay healthy. That is my morning meal. So now I'm about to start my green tea now that that's done, and I'm gonna start the next segment. So have a beautiful day. If you don't meet up with me on the other side, today is March 2nd. I gotta have a little placard. This way I don't have to even play it. I'll deal with that later. Alright, I guess that's it. I love you guys. Have a beautiful day. Stay to the code. The 6 things. Everything you eat, breathe, drink, say, do, think. And half your body weight in ounces of water. Alright, I love you kids. Have a good one. See you.